He was a titan, a man who owned the skyline with a wife he treated as just another beautiful silent acquisition. When she finally filed for divorce, he laughed. He looked at her lawyer, a man in a rumpled suit with a $500 briefcase, and mocked him. "Is that the best you can do?" He sneered, flashing his $1 million watch. He told his wife she'd be lucky to get the scraps from his table. But he made one fatal mistake. He saw the old, cheap lawyer, but he never saw the woman standing behind him. He never saw the ghost. He thought he was in a legal skirmish. He was actually in a war. And he'd just mocked the country's most dangerous attorney. Andrew Vance didn't just enter a room. He conquered it. Tonight at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts Gala was no different. He was a monolith of new money charisma poured into a custom Tom Ford tuxedo that probably cost more than the average car. His voice, a low baritone, accustomed to being obeyed, boomed across the marble atrium, charming senators and silencing competitors. At his side, impeccably dressed and perfectly silent, was his wife, Elise Vance. To the glittering Boston elite, Elise was a mystery. She was beautiful in a quiet, classical way, like a sergeant painting all graceful lines and watchful eyes. She wore a simple, elegant navy gown by a designer. No one recognized her only jewelry, the blinding 10-carat diamond on her finger. A diamond Andrew frequently referred to as his best investment. "Elise, darling, go fetch Dr. Alistair a glass of champagne, would you?" Andrew said, not looking at her. He was already deep in conversation about a new real estate development in the seaport. Elise just nodded her smile, a faint, polite mask, and slipped away. As she did, she saw Andrew's hand rest for just a moment too long on the lower back of Isabella Rossi, a 25-year-old Instagram model and brand ambassador for a dozen products Elise had never heard of. Isabella giggled, her red sequined dress clinging to her like a second skin. This was their life. A gilded K on the 50th floor of a Back Bay penthouse where the windows overlooked the Charles River, but the air inside was suffocating. Andrew hadn't always been this way. Or perhaps he had, and she had simply been too in love to see it. He was a builder, a self-made man who had clawed his way up from nothing. But in building his empire, Vance Real Estate Development, he had bulldozed his own humanity. Elise, a former art historian with a brilliant curatorial eye, had become his primary acquisition. He loved owning her. He loved the way old money families looked at her grace and refinement, and by extension had to respect him. But he did not love her. He did not listen to her, consult her, or see her. She was a prop. She returned with the champagne, her hand steady, and handed it to the doctor. Andrew, without even a glance of acknowledgement, continued his story. "The problem with this city," he declared, "is a lack of vision. People are scared of change. I'm not scared. I'm the one making it." Later that night, the mask finally cracked. They were in their penthouse, the city lights spread out below them like a carpet of fallen stars. Elise was removing her earrings when Andrew threw his jacket onto a priceless Louis XV chair. "You were quiet tonight," he said, pouring himself a 2-finger measure of Macallan 25. "I didn't have much to say. You and Isabella Rossi seemed to be handling the conversation." Her voice was soft, but for the first time it held a sliver of ice. Andrew chuckled. "Oh, that. Isabella's just fun, Elise. You should try it sometime. You're always so serious. Lighten up. It's just a party." "My sister called again, Andrew," Elise said, changing the subject, her back still to him. "She's not doing well. The doctors in Chicago want to try the new treatment. I need to go." Andrew sighed, the sound loud and theatrical. We've discussed this. It's a waste of money, all of it. That experimental nonsense, it's just snake oil for the desperate. And I need you here for the groundbreaking on the new tower next week. The press will be there. You know the drill. She's my sister. And I'm your husband. And my business, our business, requires your presence. That treatment is frivolous, and so is the trip. Send her flowers. Send her a check. But you're not going. He drained his scotch and walked toward the bedroom. And for God's sake, burn that dress. You looked like a governess. Ask Isabella who she uses, I'll pay for it. Elise stood frozen. The city lights blurred through the tears that suddenly finally welled in her eyes. It wasn't just the insult, or the callousness about her sister, or the blatant infidelity. It was the word, frivolous. He had dismissed her family, her love, her entire inner life as a triviality. She turned and looked at her reflection in the dark window. The woman staring back was a stranger, a pale ghost in a borrowed life. But as she watched, the ghost's expression hardened. The sadness receded, replaced by a cold, clear resolution. The mask wasn't just cracked. It was broken. And she was finally, terrifyingly free. The next morning, while Andrew was at his gym, Elise Vance made a single phone call. Not to a famous Boston divorce lawyer. Not to a high-powered firm. She called a number on a small, worn business card she had kept hidden in a hollowed-out art history book for 3 years. "Mr. Peterson," she said, her voice low. "This is Elise. I'm ready." Andrew Vance was in a board meeting tearing apart a junior architect's rendering for a new lobby when his assistant, a nervous young man named Ben, interrupted him. "Mr. Vance, I'm sorry, sir, but there's a gentleman here to see you. He says it's urgent." "Did he have an appointment?" Andrew snapped, not looking up from the blueprints. "No, sir, but—" "Then get rid of him." "Sir, he's a process server." The room went silent. Andrew's head snapped up. A small, unpleasant smile touched his lips. "Well, well. Let him in." The man was nondescript in a rumpled suit. He handed Andrew a thick manila envelope and left. Andrew didn't open it. He knew what it was. He tossed it onto the massive mahogany table. "Gentlemen," he said to his team, "forgive the interruption. It seems Mrs. Vance has decided to renegotiate her position in the company." His team gave forced, sycophantic chuckles. Andrew was amused. He was almost impressed. It took guts, he thought. Misguided, foolish guts. That evening he didn't go home. He went to his lawyer's office, Marcus Slade, a senior partner at Garrity. Slade and Cromwell was the most ruthless corporate litigator in Boston. His office, overlooking the harbor, was a temple of dark wood leather and smoked glass. Slade was Andrew, in a legal sense predatory, precise, and breathtakingly expensive. "She finally did it," Andrew said, tossing the envelope onto Slade's desk. Slade, a man with silver hair and the cold eyes of a shark, didn't open it. "Are we surprised? I'm surprised it took her this long. So what's the play? She'll want the penthouse. She'll want alimony. She'll cry about her emotional distress." Andrew laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Just crush her, Marcus. Make her understand her mistake. I want her gone, and I want it done cheap. Give her the standard minimal payout, the state minimum. She signed a prenup after all." "The prenup is ironclad," Slade said, finally opening the envelope and scanning the first page. "I drafted it myself. She's entitled to $1 million for every year of marriage. 10 years. 10 million, plus the Willow Creek apartment. A generous offer. She'll have no grounds to contest it. 10 million, Andrew scoffed. That's a rounding error. Fine. But not a penny more. I want her to feel this. I want her to realize what she's walking away from. And add an NDA, a permanent binding non-disclosure agreement. I don't want her running to the Globe crying about my infidelities. Slade nodded, already mentally drafting the response. And her counsel, he asked, flipping the page. Who is she using Kate's Hewitt and Breen? That's who she threatened with last time. He found the name. His brow furrowed. J. Peterson, Esquirrel, office on School Street. He tapped his keyboard, running the name through the Bar Association database. James Peterson, huh? Never heard of him. He pulled up the man's credentials. Well, this is interesting. He's a general practitioner. Wills a few DUIs, some minor real estate closings. A one-man shop. It seems Andrew, Slade said with a thin smile. Mrs. Vance went bargain shopping. Andrew threw back his head and laughed. A public defender. She's bringing a traffic lawyer to a gunfight. Oh, this is rich. This is pathetic. It's an emotional move, Slade said, closing the file. She's trying to find someone on her side instead of someone competent. It's a fatal error. We'll bleed him dry on procedural motions alone. He's probably never even seen a 100-page discovery request. Good. Send the offer. 10 million the apartment she hates, and the NDA. Non-negotiable. Tell this Peterson to advise his client to take it before I get angry and find a way to make it 5. Slade's team sent the offer the next morning. It was intentionally insulting, buried in 200 pages of legal threats and posturing. Andrew, meanwhile, didn't change his life one bit. He moved Isabella Rossi into a 5-star hotel suite. He was photographed with her at a high-profile restaurant, his arm slung possessively around her. The message was clear. He was Andrew Vance. He was untouchable. Elise was already a ghost. A week passed. Slade's office received a reply. It wasn't a counteroffer. It wasn't an angry letter. It was a single-typed page from the office of J. Peterson Esquirrel. It read simply, Dear Mr. Slade, we are in receipt of your client's proposal dated October 10th. The offer is respectfully rejected in its entirety. We will see you at the preliminary mediation. Sincerely, James Peterson, counsel for Mrs. Vance. Rejected, Andrew bellowed over the phone. Who the hell does this guy think he is? He's supposed to beg us to keep the offer on the table. Calm down, Andrew. Slade's voice was smooth. This is a good sign. It means he's an idiot. He thinks he can play hardball. He thinks he's going to walk into mediation, and the judge will just split the difference. He doesn't understand the pre-enup. He's out of his depth, and he's about to find out exactly how deep the water is. Fine, Andrew spat. Mediation it is. I want to be there. I want to see the look on this clown's face when I'm done with him. The mediation was set in a neutral, sterile conference room at a high-end arbitration center. The room was designed to be imposing with a 30-foot polished granite table and panoramic soundproof windows. Andrew arrived first, a deliberate power move. He was flanked by Marcus Slade and 2 sharp, identical-looking junior associates from Garrity Slade and Cromwell. They were a phalanx of power dressed in matching dark navy suits, carrying identical leather briefcases. Andrew, in a charcoal bespoke suit with a bold crimson tie, looked like a king holding court. He sat at the head of the table, poured himself a glass of water, and checked his Patek Philippe watch. 10 minutes late. He sniffed to Slade. Unprofessional. Already a bad start for them. "They're trying to rattle us, Andrew. It's amateur," Slade murmured, arranging his files. The door opened. Elise walked in. She looked ordinary. She wore a simple cream-colored cashmere sweater and grey flannel trousers. Her hair was pulled back. She looked like she was going to an art gallery, not a divorce battle. She took a seat halfway down the table opposite Andrew. A moment later, her lawyer followed. Andrew had to physically stifle a laugh. James Peterson was everything Andrew despised. He was at least 65 with a shock of untidy grey hair and wire-rimmed glasses. His suit was a rumpled, mustard-brown tweed that looked like it had been fashionable in 1983. It was clean, but worn at the elbows. He carried a soft-sided, worn-out leather briefcase that bulged in odd places. He looked, as Andrew had predicted, like a high school geography teacher who had lost his way. "Mr. Peterson," Slade said, his voice dripping with false cordiality as he stood to shake the man's hand. "Mr. Slade?" Peterson replied, his voice surprisingly firm. He had a faint, unplaceable accent. He sat next to Elise, pulled out a simple yellow legal pad and a single well-used fountain pen, and nodded at the mediator. "We're ready." The mediator, a retired judge, began the standard preamble. Andrew tuned it out, staring openly at Peterson. He leaned over to Slade. "Seriously, Marcus?" "Look at him," Andrew whispered, just loud enough for the other side to hear. "I've got more in my watch than he made all last year. Elise is really scraping the bottom of the barrel." Elise's expression didn't flicker. Peterson seemed not to hear his attention fully on the mediator. "Mr. Slade," the mediator said, "would you like to present your client's position?" "Gladly," Slade said. He stood all polish and menace. "Our position is simple and immovable. The pre-nuptial agreement, which Mrs. Vance reviewed with her own counsel at the time, is ironclad. It stipulates a one-time payment of $10 million, out of sheer generosity. Mr. Vance is also willing to sign over the deed to the Willow Creek apartment." He paused, letting the generosity hang in the air. "In return, we require a full and total NDA. This offer is more than fair. It is frankly extravagant. We are here today to sign this agreement and move on. There is nothing else to discuss." The mediator nodded. "Mr. Peterson." "Your response." Peterson took a moment. He uncapped his pen. "We appreciate Mr. Slade's summary," he said, his voice mild. "However, my client will not be signing that agreement. The pre-enip, as you call it, is not the issue today." Slade stiffened. "I beg your pardon? It's the only issue." "No," Peterson said, looking up, his eyes clear and intelligent behind the smudged glasses. "The issue, sir, is one of fraudulent concealment. The prenup covers all declared marital assets. Our contention is that Mr. Vance has failed to declare the vast majority of his assets." Andrew barked a laugh. "That's a bold-faced lie. A desperate one." "Is it?" Peterson asked mildly. He slid a single piece of paper across the table to the mediator. "This is a preliminary audit we conducted. It's a list of shell corporations registered in the Cayman Islands, Delaware, and Liechtenstein. Specifically, Vance Holdings International, Seaport Partners LLC, and the Kestrel Fund, all of which were established after the marriage, and all of which are funded directly from Vance Real Estate Development, but none of which appear on any of Mr. Vance's financial disclosures." Slade's smile froze. The names were correct. This is nonsense," Slade stammered, recovering. "Those are corporate entities. They have nothing to do with Mr. Vance's personal assets. They are shielded. You know this." This is a fishing expedition." "Is it?" Peterson asked again. He turned a page on his yellow pad. "Then perhaps you can explain why Seaport Partners LLC was used to purchase a $2.3 million condominium at 15 Commonwealth Avenue, a property currently occupied by a Ms. Isabella Rossi, an asset, I might add, purchased with marital funds and therefore subject to division." Andrew's face went from amused to purple. "You son of a— Mr. Vance," the mediator snapped. Slade shot to his feet. "This is an ambush. This is slander. This entire mediation is a bad faith gesture. We are done here." "I have one more question," Peterson said, his voice still calm. "It's about the Vance private server, the one hosted in a data center in Switzerland. We're just curious as to why the company's accounting software runs a shadow ledger every night at 3 a.m. A ledger that seems to siphon a small, consistent percentage of all real estate transactions into the Kestrel Fund. It looks an awful lot like tax evasion, and of course a concerted effort to defraud Mrs. Vance." The room was deathly quiet. The two junior associates were pale, staring at Slade, whose face was as white as a sheet. He knew about the server, but no one else was supposed to. Andrew stood up, knocking his chair over. He pointed a shaking finger at Peterson. "I don't know who you are, you cheap ambulance-chasing leech," he seethed. "But you just signed your own death warrant. You're a nobody. I will bury you. I will have you disbarred. You and her both will be left with nothing. Do you hear me? Nothing!" He stormed out of the room, slamming the door so hard the glass in the frame rattled. Slade was left frozen, staring at the old man in the tweed jacket. James Peterson slowly capped his fountain pen. He looked at Slade, and for the first time he smiled. It was a cold, thin, terrible smile. "Mr. Slade," he said politely, "the discovery requests we'll be filing tomorrow will be extensive. I trust you'll be more cooperative this time. Good day." He gathered his single legal pad, helped Elise with her coat, and they walked out, leaving Marcus Slade alone in the sterile, silent room. The smell of Andrew's rage and his own sudden icy fear hanging in the air. The next morning, Marcus Slade's office at Garrity Slade and Cromwell, usually a hub of calm, ruthless efficiency, was in chaos. The promised discovery request had arrived via courier. It was not as Slade had half expected, a kitchen sink request asking for everything. Those were easy to fight. This was a scalpel. It was 800 pages long, and it was a masterpiece of legal devastation. It didn't ask for all financial records. It asked for all transaction logs from inception to present for account number 45, 8B21 at Helvetica First Bank, Zurich, Switzerland, held by the Kestrel Fund. Full server logs and mirror image hard drive data from the VPSVR01 private server hosted by Swiss Data Safe AG. All correspondence including encrypted messages on the Signal platform between Andrew Vance and Isabella Rossi regarding the transfer of funds for the purchase of 15 Commonwealth Avenue Unit 8B. Deposition schedules for Mr. Vance, Ms. Rossi, and Robert Finchley. Slade's blood ran cold when he saw the last name. Finchley was Andrew's personal CFO, the only other person who knew how the shadow ledger worked. How? Slade whispered to himself, pacing his office. How does he know these names? The Kestrel Fund, the server designation. This isn't a guess. This isn't a leak. This is infiltration. He picked up the phone. Andrew, we have a problem. A significant one. No, don't yell. Just Get to my office, now. While Andrew was racing across town, Slade did what he should have done a week ago. He put his firm's high-priced private investigators on James Peterson. I want everything. Slade ordered his chief investigator, a former Mossad agent. I want to know where he buys his coffee, who he talks to, what car he drives, where he went to high school. I want to know his blood type. He's a ghost, I'm telling you. Find him. Andrew burst in his face, mottled with rage. What is this? What the hell was that yesterday? You were supposed to handle him. That, Slade said, tossing the 800-page request onto his desk, is not a geography teacher. That is a problem. It's a blizzard of paper, Andrew yelled. It's a bluff. He's trying to scare us. He's not bluffing, Andrew, Slade roared back, finally losing his composure. He listed the Swiss bank account number. He listed your private server by its model name. He knows about Finchley. This is not a man who's fishing. This is a man who already has the fish and is now asking for the boat, the lake, and the fishing lodge. Andrew's anger faltered, replaced by a flicker of genuine fear. How is that possible, Elise? She's not smart enough for this. She doesn't even know how to check her own email. She didn't find him, Slade said, the terrible realization dawning. He found her. Or someone sent him to her. The phone buzzed. It was the investigator. Well, Slade snapped, you're not going to like this, Marcus. The investigator's voice was grim. I'm sending you a file now. You were right. James Peterson. He's a ghost. But he's a very specific kind of ghost. Slade opened the email. It was a thin file. Peterson's public record was exactly as Slade had first seen small-time lawyer, clean record, nothing. But the investigator had dug deeper using facial recognition on an old photo. James Peterson was an alias, a very, very good one. His real name was James Harrigan. He hadn't been a lawyer for the past 20 years. He'd been a senior forensic accountant and investigator for the U.S. Department of Justice, specializing in dismantling organized crime syndicates. He had retired 5 years ago and vanished. He's not a lawyer, Slade said, his voice hollow. Oh, he's a lawyer, all right, the investigator said. He passed the bar in '79. But that's not what he does. He's an investigator, a bloodhound. But here's the kicker, Marcus. Look at the last page. His known associates. Slade scrolled down. There was only one name linked to a single explosive case from 10 years prior, the takedown of a corrupt hedge fund billionaire. Peterson, then Harrigan, had been the lead investigator and the lead prosecutor who had put the billionaire in prison. Oh my God, Slade whispered. He sank into his $8,000 office chair. Who? Andrew demanded. Who is it? Slade looked up, his face ashen. He's not working alone, Andrew. He's not the lawyer. He's the investigator. He's the man they send in to find the bodies before the war even starts. Who is the lawyer, Marcus? Who are we up against? We're not up against a who, Slade said, reading the name on the file. We're up against a what? He works for Serafina Hayes. The name just hung in the air. Andrew looked blank. Who? I've never heard of her. Is she good? Marcus Slade started to laugh. It was a high, thin, terrified sound. Is she good? Andrew, you idiot. You absolute arrogant idiot. You just stood in a room and mocked a man who works for the Matador. Serafina Hayes isn't good. She's not a lawyer. She's an ending. She doesn't practice law. She is the law. She's the person billionaires call when they want to destroy other billionaires. She's the person the government quietly consults on unwinnable cases. She hasn't lost a case in 22 years. She's not on the news. She's not in the magazines because she's a ghost, just like Peterson. She only takes cases she knows she'll win. And she just signaled through him that she already has. Andrew's legendary confidence, the bedrock of his entire personality, visibly crumbled. So it's Iredon. What do we do? You fight back. You file motions. You bury her. You don't understand, Slade said, standing up and walking to the window. We can't. That 800-page request. It's a courtesy. It's her telling us that she has all of this. The server logs, the Swiss account numbers. She's not requesting them. She's telling us she already has them. Peterson didn't just find this information. He spent the last 6 months, probably a year, digging it all up before Elise even filed. That cheap lawyer. He was her ghost, and we just spat in his face. What? What does she want? Andrew asked, his voice suddenly small. Everything, Slade said, turning from the window. She wants everything. And the worst part, Andrew. She's going to get it. Marcus Slade, for the first time in his career, was on the defensive. He did the only thing he could. He stalled. He filed a motion to quash the discovery requests, calling them a grotesque overreach irrelevant and designed purely to harass. It was a standard aggressive legal tactic, but he knew with a sickening certainty that it was like trying to stop a tsunami with a piece of plywood. The hearing for the motion was set in the Suffolk County Courthouse before Judge Amelia Grant, a no-nonsense jurist who despised theatrical lawyers and valued preparation above all else. Andrew, on Slade's frantic advice, did not attend. "You'll just lose your temper and make it worse," Slade had warned him. Slade and his 2 junior associates arrived 30 minutes early. They were the only ones in the courtroom besides the bailiff. Slade felt a flicker of hope. Maybe she wouldn't show. Maybe she'd send Peterson to argue the motion. He could handle Peterson. He could out-lawyer the old man. At 8:58 a.m. the doors opened. James Peterson walked in wearing the exact same mustard-yellow tweed jacket. He was carrying his battered briefcase. He gave Slade a polite, almost kindly nod and sat down at the opposing table. Slade's shoulders relaxed. He'd been spooked by a name, a reputation. But it was just the geography teacher. "All rise," the bailiff called. Judge Grant entered, and the proceedings began. "Mr. Slade, the judge said you filed this motion to quash. The burden is on you. Why should I gut Mr. Peterson's entire discovery?" Slade stood. He was back in his element. "Your Honor, this is a simple divorce governed by a prenuptial agreement. Counsel for Mrs. Vance is attempting to turn this into a corporate inquisition. His requests for Swiss server data and offshore corporate ledgers are wildly out of scope. They are irrelevant to the division of marital assets as defined by the pre-NUP. It is a classic baseless fishing expedition." He spoke for 10 minutes, his voice resonating with confidence and legal precedent. He felt good. He was winning. Judge Grant turned to the plaintiff's table. "Mr. Peterson, your response." James Peterson stood up slowly. "Your Honor," he began, his mild voice filling the space. "Mr. Slade is correct. It would be a fishing expedition if we didn't already know exactly what was in the water." "Objection," Slade snapped. "Speculation." "Mr. Peterson," the judge said, "do you have anything more than speculation?" "I do, Your Honor," Peterson said. "But I must apologize to the court. My lead counsel has been delayed. She has the specific evidence you're requesting. She should be here, as if summoned. The heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom swung open with a soft whoosh. The sound of stiletto heels on marble was the only sound in the room. It was a sharp, predatory click, click, click that echoed in the silence. Marcus Slade turned. His blood, which had been pumping with the thrill of combat, turned to slush. A woman was walking down the aisle. She was tall with severe jet-black hair, pulled into a flawless chignon. She wore a bespoke charcoal-grey suit that was understated yet screamed power. Her face was angular with high cheekbones, and eyes so dark they seemed to absorb the light. She carried a single, slim black document case. The entire courtroom, from the stenographer to the judge, visibly sat up straighter. She stopped beside Peterson and placed her case on the table. "My apologies for the interruption. Your Honor." Her voice was a low, precise contralto, with a chilling lack of inflection. "Serafina Hayes, lead counsel for the plaintiff, Mrs. Elise Vance. Mr. Peterson, my senior investigative counsel, was just setting the stage." Slade felt the blood drain from his face. It was her. She was real. The matador was in the room. "Hayes," Judge Grant said, her tone respectful. "A pleasure. You are not often into this particular courtroom." "I go where my clients need me." "Your Honor," Serafina said, "and my client needs this motion denied. Mr. Slade argues relevance." "Very well." She opened her case. "Mr. Slade claims the Kestrel Fund is irrelevant. I submit to the court Exhibit A." She nodded to Peterson, who handed a file to the judge. "This is a wire transfer confirmation, dated 3 weeks after Mrs. Vance filed for divorce, showing a transfer of $15 million from Mr. Vance's personal brokerage account into the Kestrel Fund. A clear, deliberate, and illegal attempt to hide a marital asset." Slade's mouth went dry. He hadn't known about that. Andrew had lied to him. "He argues the private server is out of scope," Serafina continued, her voice cutting through the silence. "I submit Exhibit B." Peterson handed up a second file. "This is a sworn affidavit from a former employee of Vance Real Estate Development, Mr. Robert Finchley." Slade actually staggered. Finchley. They had gotten to Finchley. "Mr. Finchley attests," Serafina said, "that he was personally instructed by Mr. Vance to create and maintain a shadow ledger on that exact server for the express purpose of skimming profits to defraud not only his business partners, but the IRS and, by extension, his wife. The affidavit includes detailed examples." She turned for the first time and looked directly at Marcus Slade. Her eyes were not angry. They were not triumphant. They were impossibly bored. It was the look of a biologist studying a microbe. "The prenuptial agreement," she said, "is a contract, and all contracts are rendered null and void by one simple thing: criminal fraud. Mr. Slade's client didn't just hide assets. He committed multiple felonies. My discovery requests are not a fishing expedition, Your Honor. They are a confirmation." She turned back to the judge. "We are no longer discussing a pre-enup. We are discussing a criminal enterprise, and Mrs. Vance is entitled to her share of all of it. Deny this motion, Your Honor, or my next stop is the U.S. Attorney's office. The choice really is Mr. Slade's." There was a full minute of suffocating silence. Judge Grant looked at the files. She looked at the ashen, speechless Marcus Slade. She looked at Serafina Hayes. "Mr. Slade," the judge asked, "anything to add?" Slade opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He closed it. He shook his head. Motion to quash is denied. Judge Grant said, her gavel striking the wood with the finality of a death knell. Mr. Slade, you will produce all requested materials to Ms. Hayes's office within 48 hours. And, sir, I suggest you advise your client on the severe penalties for perjury and obstruction of justice. We are adjourned. Serafina Hayes snapped her document case shut. Mr. Peterson, thank you for fetching my coffee, she said, loud enough for Slade to hear. Peterson smiled his thin smile. Of course, Ms. Hayes. They turned and walked out, click, 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 leaving Marcus Slade alone, shaking at the defendant's table. The war was over. The annihilation was about to begin. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. When Marcus Slade returned to his office, he found Andrew Vance already there, pacing the floor like a shint bear. Well, Andrew demanded, did you crush him? Did you get the motion? Slade walked past him, went straight to the bar cart in his office, and poured a heavy measure of whiskey. He drank it in one swallow. She was there, Andrew, he said, his voice flat. She who's she? Serafina Hayes. She was in the courtroom. So you're Marcus Slade. You're supposed to be the best. The best. Slade rounded on him, his professional mask gone replaced by pure, undiluted panic. You lied to me, Andrew. You lied to your own counsel, the Kestrel Fund. You moved 15 million after she filed. Are you insane? It's my money, Andrew roared. It's a felony, Slade screamed back. And she knew. She had the wire transfer. And Finchley. She has a sworn affidavit from Robert Finchley about the shadow ledger. She has everything. She wasn't asking for discovery, Andrew. She was showing us her evidence. Andrew Vance, for the first time in his adult life, looked truly, deeply terrified. Finchley, that's not possible. This is what she does, Slade raved, pouring another drink. This is the Matador's signature move. The case is over before it ever begins. Peterson, that cheap lawyer. He wasn't a lawyer. He was her private intelligence. He's been on you for months. While you were at Garlus laughing about your stupid wife, this man was... God knows. He was probably posing as a janitor, a technician, a banker. The story of how Elise had found her was like Serafina herself, simple and secret. 3 years ago, at an art benefit, Elise had confided in an older, wiser mentor, a woman who had famously been divorced from a New York hedge fund magnate and inexplicably had ended up with everything. My dear, the woman had told her, lawyers are for the press. When you actually want to win, you call a ghost. She had given Elise the business card for J. Peterson Escrew, with a simple instruction: call him when you can no longer bear to live the life you have. Not a moment sooner. When Elise made that call, Peterson met her not in an office, but on a bench in the Boston Public Garden. She told him her story. He listened silent for an hour. When she was done, he'd said only, "She will take the case, but you must do exactly as I say. Do not change a single thing about your life. Do not confront him. Do not show your hand. You must continue to be the ghost in his house. Go home. Be the perfect silent wife. We will handle the rest." For the next 6 months, James Peterson had been a phantom. He posed as a high net worth investor from Germany, meeting with Robert Finchley to discuss off-market opportunities and appealing to the man's own greed. He'd gotten Finchley to boast about the brilliant server system his boss used. He had flown to the Caymans and, using his old DOJ credentials quietly reactivated by friends in high places, had managed to pierce the corporate veil of Vance Holdings. He had quite simply dismantled Andrew's entire empire brick by fraudulent brick, all while Andrew was busy mocking his wife's dress. Now, with the discovery motion granted, Serafina's team didn't just act, they invaded. Within 48 hours, they had a court-appointed forensic team making a mirror image of the Swiss server. They subpoenaed Isabella Rossi. Her deposition was a masterpiece of humiliation. Under Serafina's cold, precise questioning, the young woman dissolved into tears, admitting not only to the affair, but to the $2.3 million condo, a $150,000 black Amex, paid by a Kestrel fund account, and a garage full of cars. It was a clear, massive, and fraudulent dissipation of marital assets. Then they deposed Andrew. It was not a deposition. It was a vivisection. It was held in Serafina's conference room, a minimalist space of white marble and glass. For 12 hours, Serafina and Peterson, sitting side by side, walked Andrew through every single illegal transaction, every email, every text message. They presented him with the server logs. They showed him the wire transfers. They played a recording obtained legally by Finchley of Andrew, instructing him to bury the European profits in the Kestrel Fund. Andrew's bluster dissolved into monosyllabic, mumbled answers. I don't recall. That could mean anything. I'd have to check my records. Marcus Slade sat beside him, chain-drinking coffee, objecting on grounds of relevance and harassment, his voice getting weaker with every hour. Serafina merely noted his objections for the record and continued her relentless, quiet assault. By the end of the day, Andrew Vance was not just a defendant. He was a broken man. But Serafina wasn't finished. As they were packing up, she said, "Oh, one more thing, Mr. Slade." She nodded to Peterson, who placed a small final file on the table. While Mr. Peterson was reviewing the server logs, he found something curious, Serafina said. It seems Mr. Vance's development company has a habit of using substandard, non-code compliant steel in his high-rise buildings and filing falsified inspection reports with the city of Boston, a city, I might add, that is currently reviewing his bid for the new waterfront project. Slade looked at the file. It was an engineer's report, cross-referenced with invoices for cheap foreign steel. It was undeniable proof of corners cut, of public endangerment. This, Serafina said, goes beyond marital fraud. This is a public matter. Wire fraud, tax evasion. And now this. Mr. Vance hasn't just built a house of cards. He's built a literal one. She looked at Andrew, her dark eyes devoid of all emotion. Mr. Slade will receive our final settlement offer in the morning. I strongly suggest you accept it, without negotiation. The offer arrived at 8:00 a.m. the next morning. It was not a negotiation. It was a surrender document. Marcus Slade read it, his hands shaking, and called Andrew. You need to come here. You need to sign this. Today. I'm not signing anything. Andrew's voice was thin, reedy, all the baritone bluster gone. We fight. We take this to trial. There is no trial, Andrew. Slade finally snapped, all pretense of loyalty gone. Do you understand me? She has you. She has you on wire fraud, tax evasion, and racketeering. That's RICO, you idiot! We are not in a divorce proceeding. We are in a hostage negotiation. The settlement is her letting you stay out of federal prison. The final meeting was set for noon, not in a neutral space. In Serafina Hayes's office, Andrew Vance entered for the first time, not as a conqueror, but as a supplicant. He was pale, he hadn't shaved, and his expensive suit looked too large for him as if he'd shrunk. Elise was already there, seated at the long white table, flanked by Peterson and Serafina. She looked serene, wearing a simple blue dress. She looked at Andrew as he entered, and he saw for the first time not the meek wife, but the woman who had sanctioned his destruction. There was no pity in her eyes, just finality. "Thank you for coming," Serafina said, as if they were there to discuss the weather. "The terms are, I believe, clear." She laid out the document. 1. Elise Vance would receive 60% of all marital assets. Not the declared assets, but the true assets, including the offshore accounts, the Kestrel Fund, and the Cayman holdings. The total value was estimated at just over $900 million. 2. The Boston penthouse and all art and furnishings contained within would be signed over to Elise free and clear. 3. The 15 Commonwealth Avenue condo currently occupied by Isabella Rossi would be signed over to Elise to be liquidated at her discretion. 4. Andrew Vance would pay a one-time alimony sum of $50 million to compensate for the deliberate and fraudulent attempts to conceal assets. 5. Andrew Vance would pay all of Elise's legal fees, including the multi-million-dollar retainer for Ms. Hayes and Mr. Peterson. 6. The NDA was voided. Elise would be free to speak. Andrew, however, would be subject to a new permanent NDA, forbidding him from ever speaking about Elise Serafina Hayes or the details of the case under penalty of a $100 million fine. Andrew was breathing hard. This is theft." "No," Serafina said, not looking up from her papers. "This is a discount, because there is a 7th term." She slid a second, much smaller document across the table. "This is a confession," she said. "It's a full detailed admission of the shadow ledger, the tax evasion, and the wire fraud. It has been prepared for the U.S. Attorney's Office. Next to it is our settlement agreement." She finally looked at him. "You will sign one. If you sign the settlement, this confession is shredded. The evidence of your corporate fraud, the bad steel, the fake inspections is sealed. It will never see the light of day. If you hesitate, if you argue, if you try to negotiate $1, Mr. Peterson will walk this confession and all its supporting evidence across the street to the federal courthouse. You will be in a holding cell by 5 p.m. Your company will be destroyed. Your partners will sue you, and you will spend the next 20 to 30 years in prison." She pushed a gold pen across the table. "You have 60 seconds to decide which document you'd like to sign, Mr. Vance." Andrew stared at the pen. He looked at Slade, who just stared at the table. He looked at Elise, who watched him, her expression unreadable. He saw his entire life, the galas, the cars, the power evaporating. His hand, shaking violently, reached out. He grabbed the pen. He pulled the 40-page settlement agreement toward him, and with a choked sob, he signed the last page. Serafina Hayes took the document, reviewed the signature, and nodded. She then picked up the confession, walked to a shredder by her desk, and fed it in. The sound of grinding teeth filled the room. "Our business is concluded, Mr. Vance," she said. "You may leave. Mr. Slade, please wait to discuss the transfer logistics." Andrew stood a hollowed-out shell of the man who had entered. He tried to look at Elise to say something, an apology, a curse, but she had already turned away. She was looking out the window at the Boston skyline. Her skyline. Andrew Vance walked out of the office, a free man, and a ruined one. The final scene took place 2 weeks later. Elise was not in a high-rise penthouse, but in a small, bright cafe in the South End. The morning sun streamed in. She was sipping a coffee, sketching in a notebook. The bell on the door jingled, and James Peterson sat down opposite her, a small smile on his face. He was, she noted, still wearing the tweed jacket. "Elise," he said warmly. "James," she smiled. "Thank you for meeting me. I never really got to thank you. For everything. You saved my life." Peterson waved it off. "We just balanced the books. Serafina hates bullies, and frankly so do I. He never did get me that coffee, did he?" Elise laughed, a real, genuine laugh. It was a sound she hadn't made in a decade. "I'll buy you all the coffee you want, James. What's next for you?" "Oh, I hear there's a tech billionaire in Seattle who needs a geography lesson," he said with a wink. He stood up, placing a small wrapped box on the table. "A parting gift," he said, "from Serafina." Elise opened it. Inside, on a bed of velvet, was the Patek Philippe watch Andrew had been wearing at the mediation, the one he'd boasted about. It had been technically a marital asset. Elise looked at the watch, a symbol of all that arrogance and cruelty. Then she looked at Peterson. "What will you do now, Elise?" he asked. She looked out the window at the people walking by, at the life she was about to start. Her sister was flying in tomorrow to stay with her in the penthouse to start her new, fully funded treatment. Her gallery was set to open in the spring. "I think," she said, slipping the watch into her pocket, "to sell for charity. I'm going to finish my sketch." She was, for the first time in a very long time, free. In the end, it wasn't about the money. It was about the silence. Andrew Vance made his fortune building towering, empty monuments to himself, but he was destroyed by the two people he never bothered to see: a quiet wife he thought was weak, and an old man he thought was cheap. He never realized that true power doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need a $5,000 suit or a flashy watch. True power is patient, it's intelligent, it waits, it watches, and it keeps its receipts. Elise didn't just win a settlement, she won her life back. She proved that the most dangerous person in the room is often the one everyone underestimates. What did you think of Serafina's strategy? Was Andrew's takedown as satisfying for you as it was for me? Let me know your favorite part in the comments below. This story is a powerful reminder to never ever judge a book by its cover. If you love stories of justice, karma, and epic revenge, please hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel and ring that bell. We have so many more stories to tell, and you won't want to miss a single one. Thanks for listening.